I want to provide the practicals here because I used to hear that as a younger dancer, and I was like, okay, great, how? Hey dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome back to the Confident Dancer channel or podcast if you're listening in podcast form. Today I'm going to share with you 7 tips on how to de-stress or reduce your stress as a dancer. I know that you're going to be able to find at least one of these tips really actionable and helpful. So my challenge to you is to not just listen to this for inspiration, but to actually put the intention into practice of doing one of these things. And notice that over the next week, if you're practicing this, or even tomorrow or today, if you put one of these into action, you will feel hopefully more present, calm. I notice that when I do at least one of these things, I feel even a lot more joyful. I don't know about you, but when I'm stressed or just overwhelmed or anxious, I not only don't feel joy, I also just feel kind of just more negative, more overwhelmed, less present, less effective overall. So let's dive into the tips. So the first tip is honestly really easy and really simple. It's just to lower your intake of input and information and noise in general. I don't know about you, but for me, I can easily just get this buildup of clutter in my head. I don't feel regulated. I feel more stressed just when I indulge my constant urge to be like entertained or informed. And so if I'm constantly listening to music, podcasts, talking to people, reading, constantly intaking information or noise, it just builds up my state of tension and stress and overwhelm. So the first really easy thing you could do is just start to incorporate more moments of silence throughout your day and be really conscious of what information you're taking in, whether that is curating who you follow on social media or just being on social media less or just consuming less content and having more moments throughout the day where you are silent and just with yourself and your own thoughts. That's going to provide you a lot more opportunity to connect with yourself, connect with the present moment, and to regulate. And when I say regulate, I mean process emotions or thoughts or declutter your mind. Just work through maybe challenges in your head that haven't quite been worked through. We need these moments of connection with ourselves throughout the day in order to recalibrate and to process and let go of the things that are stressing us out. So if you're taking in too much information or constantly being stimulated by noise, that's going to lower your ability to recalibrate and regulate, and therefore it's going to cause you more stress. The next tip is to really check your have-tos. In our minds, it's often not conscious, but a lot of us have this mental checklist of all the things we have to do, how we have to do it, blah, 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 blah. Maybe it's I have to cross-train and I have to do this and I have to make this teacher happy or dance this way. Sometimes our have-tos are practical actions and sometimes our have-tos are expectations for ourselves of how we need to show up to be good today. My challenge to you is to examine some of those have-tos in your mind. Like, what are some expectations you're placing on yourself? And look at how some of them might not be necessary and they might be adding to your sense of stress and overwhelm. So I always love doing this with coaching clients when a dancer comes to work with me to build their confidence or let go of self-doubt, lack of self-trust, comparison, things like that. A lot of times, one big part of what we do in the very beginning of working together is looking at what are all your expectations of yourself, your beliefs about yourself, the have-tos that are really showing up as you feeling a lot of pressure, stress, feeling behind, doubting yourself, having a disconnection with yourself that leads to a lack of self-trust. Yeah, it can be so helpful to look at those expectations and those have-tos that are just living rent-free in the back of our heads. So this one is also, it can be really liberating, really easy, actually. Not that all of our expectations are easy to process, acknowledge, and let go of, but some of them will be shockingly easy to let go of. So definitely start to become aware of what are the have-tos that you're imposing on yourself and see which ones you can just take off your plate today. The next thing is to check your or else's, as I like to say, the have-tos and the or else's. And what I mean by that is start to become aware of the imagined consequences that are also living rent-free in your head of, if you don't do XYZ, if you don't make everyone happy, if you're not perfect today. So often we are carrying around these imagined consequences of, this person's going to judge me, or this bad thing might happen, or I'll never be the dancer I want to be, I'll never get into this program or get this contract or be a professional dancer, or whatever it is. We can build up these imagined consequences in our heads of what might happen or what we think will happen if we're basically not perfect and we don't do all the things. The beautiful thing is when we start to become conscious or aware of our imagined negative consequences, we can start to challenge them. Honestly, a lot of them will not come to fruition. I can't say all of them because I don't know what imagined consequences are going on in your head. Some of them are very logical, but even if it's a logical negative consequence you're afraid of that is stressing you out and causing you to feel like you have to do all the things and be perfect and hustle all the time and overwork yourself, even if it's logical, it doesn't mean it's likely. A great way to redirect your energy is to not only challenge the imagined negative consequences that are showing up as you feeling a lot of stress and pressure, but also to, instead of focus on, oh my gosh, I have to do all these things to avoid it from happening, you can say, okay, how likely is it that that'll happen, period? And also, is this pressure I'm putting on myself actually making it more likely that that negative consequence might happen? And sometimes it's even more helpful to say, okay, even if that did happen, how would I move forward? A lot of times your brain is so stuck in the worry and fear cycle of like, oh my gosh, avoid this bad thing from happening, that we're building up the importance of how much, if that bad thing happened, if that person judged us, if we made a mistake, we are playing up too much how that would ruin our lives in some way, and we're forgetting to imagine what would happen if that did happen and how we would just move on. Like, you will just move on. One of the most liberating things I think about getting older is, in my own life, and I've witnessed a lot of clients experience this too, that sometimes when their greatest fears happen, like let's say they don't get a contract or they lose their contract or they get an injury, what happens on the other side of that hardship is they're actually liberated because they realize, oh my gosh, I lived through one of my greatest fears. Again, let's focus on the first part of that sentence. I lived and life goes on. So a great way to get your brain out of that worry cycle is to actually imagine, what would I do if that worst fear did happen? And it can help you to actually find calmness and trust that it's actually not that bad. Like, you would move on, and it gives your brain the opportunity to stop catastrophizing so much. The fourth one is ultra basic, and there's a lot of research and science around this. When we get outside, it helps our nervous system tremendously. I think it's not only important to find moments where you get outside. This doesn't always mean a walk, even though walks are really, really good for regulating your nervous system, helping your brain process whatever's been going on in your mind and emotionally. But even if you just stand outside or just like feel the wind on your skin or let the sun hit your skin and just like take in your surroundings, especially if they're green, that is so good for regulating your nervous system. And additionally, if you're simultaneously pairing that with lower screen time and less time in your foveal vision. Foveal vision is when you have that narrow focus. A lot of times, like our focus kind of goes like this instead of being peripheral and expansive. This gets us into the sympathetic nervous system, that more stressed out state, like it's associated with us feeling stressed out or in that fight or flight kind of mode. Or also when we're in foveal vision, again, which also happens when we're indoors on screens, in our heads, like we get a lot more in our heads. That's why it's so great to get out in nature. It also helps you expand out into peripheral vision, which I can make a whole video about that. I'm not going to go into that, the nerdy details of that. I do that a lot. With coaching clients, like teaching them more about how their mind works and how to work with the way their mind actually works in order to develop confidence, perform better, let go of struggles like self-doubt, low self-confidence, performance anxiety, blah, blah, blah. So by the way, if you're interested in support in overcoming those mental challenges, that's what the Confident Dancer coaching program is for. Information for that will be down below, linked as always in the description. You can visit theconfidentdancer.com. Anyway, get outside. Get into peripheral vision, not just foveal vision. And let's get into the next point. The next one is to stay present. And you've heard that a million times, I'm sure, but some practical ways that you can get present. And I want to provide the practicals here because I used to hear that as a younger dancer. And I was like, okay, great, how? It seemed so ephemeral. I couldn't understand how to practically do it. Some very practical ways to do it are getting into sensory awareness. So instead of being focused just on the thoughts pinging around in your mind at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you can tune into, okay, how does my breath feel? What does my body feel like? What's the temperature of the air in the room? Take in something visual, like really examine. Even sometimes I do this as an exercise to ground myself and be present between meetings when I'm working with clients all day. I'll kind of look at the wall, and my wall has a little bit of texture, and I'll just examine the texture of the wall in detail, and it kind of, it, yes, gets me out of my head, but it gets me more in the present moment, focusing on something that's real, that's here, that's now, and not just on the thoughts that are going to be here one moment and gone the next. Tuning into what your senses can pick up, not just what thoughts you're perceiving or ideas that you're getting caught up in, that can really get you more in the present moment. And again, silence is also a very, very good tool for that. That's why I put it in the first tip. The next one is to journal in order to distill down how big the problems you're experiencing feel in your head. And so what I mean by this is when we are stressed out, a lot of times we get into this state of mind where we start focusing on something that we think is wrong. Whatever we focus on, it expands in our awareness. So when you start to focus on what's going wrong, how easy is it to not only feel like that's a huge deal and it's so bad that it's happening, but also you might start to focus on other things that you think are wrong. And it kind of just breeds into this big thing where then it just feels like, oh my gosh, I must be messed up. My life isn't going well. You know, obviously I'm exaggerating here, but sometimes, I mean, being real, don't we all experience that a little bit? Like it starts with one thing and then it just starts to pile up and then we just feel really stressed and overwhelmed. So that's why journaling is a great tool. And when I talk about journaling, more specifically, when you're journaling, I recommend that you actually put out, even in bullet points, to maybe focus your mind a little bit more. Like, what specifically is bothering you? How does it make you feel? What is something that you can do to start to change that? Or how bad is it really? It just gets your mind focused on the facts of the situation, and it helps you to process the feelings associated with the actual facts, you know, because a lot of times our minds go beyond the facts and they make a big old story around whatever the stressor is. So journaling helps you to focus on what actually is true and notice your own maybe cognitive distortions, the stories you're making out of the facts, that maybe the story isn't real, the story isn't helpful to you perhaps. And I don't say that to inspire you to judge yourself, because we all do this, it's the most human thing, but rather to just understand yourself and be compassionate. Oh, I understand I'm feeling this way. Okay, I can see how I feel this way. And I can also see how maybe I don't have to feel this way. I can see how I'm thinking. Okay, maybe I don't have to think that way. So curiosity is a really great tool, and journaling, I find that it's personally most helpful for me when I kind of take the thoughts that are going on in my head and I put it down on paper. It helps it to go from feeling very big in my mind to actually like, oh, that's smaller than I thought it was. It helps me to remember that these experiences are temporary and not permanent. And also, I find that I naturally, and I encourage you to do this too, I naturally want to end on solutions or hope. After I process some things, I kind of naturally go more towards, okay, and here's what I can do about it, or here's what I've learned, or here's what I want to try, or accepting what is. Maybe there's nothing to change, except just your own attitude towards it, acceptance towards whatever is going on. So yeah, journaling really helps cut through the overwhelm and distill down how big the problem feels into something more manageable. The last tip is to check your values. In other words, what are you prioritizing? So often as dancers, I especially notice this when I'm coaching dancers and maybe they come in and they're experiencing a lot of stress, or they're just having a hard time being present as they dance. They're very in their head. They're not enjoying themselves, not performing to their fullest potential because of what's going on in their head and in their emotions. A lot of times their values end up explaining a lot of how they are thinking and feeling about themselves and their experience. So what I mean by that is our values are really the general things that are important to us, the things we're prioritizing. So for example, a value can be status. When I say status, a lot of us wouldn't say like, oh, I have a value for status as a dancer, but how that is lived out, and this might feel familiar to you, is a lot of dancers feel this sense of pressure and a desire to be one of the better dancers in the room. And they sense that that would feel good and that maybe it would save them from the negative thoughts and feelings they have towards themselves. What that can actually be is a value for status, being better than other dancers. Not always, but I'm just using an example here. So that value not only becomes this magnet towards like what motivates you, like what you're motivated towards, it also indicates what you focus on, what you think is important, and therefore how you feel about yourself, because your values become your measuring system for how you're doing. And hello, doesn't that either cause or reduce stress? So if you're valuing, let's say, when you're really honest with yourself, perfection, not excellence, but perfection, that perfection, the value is not only going to indicate or influence what you focus on, what you do in the direction you're moving in, but it also dictates how you are evaluating yourself. Oh, not perfect, not good enough. Oh, I did this wrong, I need to fix it immediately. Self-deprecation. Versus if you examine your values and say, all right, you know what, I'm really prioritizing image, like looking a certain way to feel good about myself. How is that working for me? Is it causing me to judge myself more harshly? Is it creating body image issues? Okay, well then maybe you can acknowledge that and start to examine what else could you value or prioritize that would help promote a lot more kindness towards yourself, a lot more enjoyment of your personal journey or the practice of dance itself. Maybe some values could be growth instead of perfection, or joy instead of accomplishment. We can play with our values. So that's why my last encouragement to you is to examine your values, see if they're working for you, and if they're not, you can start to play around with living through and for new values that could perhaps reduce the sense of stress and pressure that you feel. So dancers, I hope you found this video really, really helpful. Please let me know in the comments what tip that you are excited to put into action and what you enjoyed the most. I'd really love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, or if you're listening on podcasts, share with a friend or on your Instagram stories. Just tag me so I can see you and appreciate you for that. And yeah, like I said, if you're interested in individual support to increase your confidence as a dancer, to be able to perform at your personal best level consistently by using the power of your mind. And if you'd like to really overcome certain mental challenges like perfectionism, self-doubt, lack of self-trust, not feeling good enough, all sorts of things like that, self-criticism, perfectionism, blah, 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 all those things that dancers tend to struggle with, definitely reach out for support. That's what the Confident Dancer Coaching Program is designed to help with. So like I said, information for that will be down below at theconfidentdancer.com. You'll be able to learn more about the program there and apply for a free 30-minute consultation. It's just a time for you and I to connect and to talk about your personal goals and challenges, just to see if working together would genuinely be a good fit. So absolutely no strings attached in that conversation. So you've got nothing to lose. If you're at all curious, definitely take advantage of that and check it out. So I hope you have a wonderful day and stay tuned for next week's episode. Thanks. Bye.